The tension that is built at that moment with the fireworks and the delivery and
the timing too of all of that.
By the way,
all that
spoiling the shit
happens.
out of A Quiet Place.
Yeah, I realized too that while that helped jog my memory, it didn't describe anything. But I think the general gist is like they can't make noise or they'll be killed by these aliens. They're at the beginning of the movie. One of the family's 2 kids is killed by an alien.
Kids.
3. So, yeah. Sorry, it's been a minute. Sorry.
Because the whole family had traveled into town because the one is sick. That's how it starts, and that's. Again, I love how this movie gives all the exposition for the situation they're in through the newspaper clippings. Like as they're leaving the store, the pharmacy that they're in, there's like a stack of newspapers and the front page says it's noise, meaning that's what sets them off, and
they cracked it. Yeah.
And they had figured that out at that point.
And the trailer had like news reports, but we didn't hear news reports in the movie, right?
No.
What she watches on the TV screen is all surveillance. Like there isn't any of those news clippings. I think they just like added those into the trailer. News clips from television. Yeah. Because in the movie itself, you just see those television screens. Those are just like closed circuit like monitors and surveillance cameras that are set up around the property.
Yep. Because they set that up too in that opening shot. There's hardly even any sign language, because that's how this family was able to survive, because they all knew sign language, because one of the kids are deaf, and so they were able to still communicate without making noises. I like to think that's one of the things that contributed to them surviving, on top of John Krasinski being
absolutely. I mean, that's one of those things about these kind of stories. It's like there's all these families that are, or whatever, there's all these people going through the same thing.
Right.
But it's interesting to follow this family because they've done well because of this unique situation where they are able to communicate without sound.
So in that opening shot, though, gives all the exposition really that you get that shot and the shot when he's down in the basement and you see the limited amount of research that he's been able to do in that kind of like war room that he has, like surveillance room, basically. That's like a ham radio, electronic lab / surveillance room for his property. But in that opening scene too, when he's showing the components that he got, one of the things he pulls out of his bag that's just kind of is a surveillance camera. So he was pilfering those from around to put up on his property.
Yeah. Emily Blunt's character is a doctor. They don't say that explicitly, but they do when I was reading the Wikipedia page about it. So you see her like putting the stethoscope on her belly to like hear her unborn child's heartbeat, and it's because she's a doctor, and that's why they're going to the pharmacy, and she knows which
medicine to look at,
to look for and find for her son.
Wow. And
she's a doctor, and I forget what it says he is. If I find it, I'll let you know.
Well, and I mean, and that makes sense.
Salesman.
That makes sense too.
John Krasinski's an engineer.
And that makes sense. So they have this perfect storm. It sounds like it's perfect storm of events, and maybe that's why they had the courage. One thing that Ash pointed out when we were watching it was, it could be argued that it was immensely irresponsible of them to get pregnant. Because Emily Blunt is not pregnant at the start of the movie. It's like day 84 of this. It's never really said if it's an invasion or if they're mutants or if they're. Did you find that out in any of your research?
It's like over 3 months in 2020, most of Earth's humans and animal populations have been wiped out by sightless creatures of unknown origin.
There you go. So we don't know where they come from. What was I saying?
So irresponsible of them to get
pregnant. Because... So, but that kind of takes away that, because if she was a doctor and he's an engineer, that's how they were able to come up with, because you find out that they have this plan, because it goes from like day 84 to day like 400 and something, like where it's been over a year now that they have been surviving, and she is about to burst pregnant, and they have a compound essentially all established, and they're in the process of soundproofing a room in their barn because they're going to have a screaming machine in a world that you're not allowed to make noise, basically. And that one, it's funny when you watch trailers, because it's like you only see the creatures up until the ending. You only see the creatures in flashes, and only like 4 flashes, and you saw 2 of them in the trailer.
Yep.
And
that's a complaint of scary movies, is that most of the time they show you the scariest parts in the trailer, so the movie itself doesn't end up being that
and they
scary.
depend on jump scares, which this movie does.
It did have a couple jump scares, and I'm
it uses sound for that. So
when the sound comes, comes, it makes you jump because the whole rest of the movie is so freaking quiet.
I remember being in the theater and like I didn't want to eat my popcorn because it made noise. You know, and like it just
right.
It was
so it was the quietest, like most tense theater experience I've ever had.
Yeah, and man, it just is. It's so good. It's just so good.
Yeah.
And the trailer also, like, it gives one of the biggest conversations that happen, where she's just like, when she says, "Who are we if we can't protect them?" That's the gist of the movie right there.
Is the length that a parent will go to protect their child. Yep.
Yep.
I have a question as someone who hasn't seen it since it came out. Is she pregnant in the opening scenes where they still have the...
No.
So she gets pregnant after that. So I wonder if they kind of keep that in the... I don't know, because maybe it'll bring new life, literally, and some hope into having lost that other child. But
that's how I interpreted it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or is it this twisted way to replace the child that they lost? Because they lost their youngest child.
Yeah.
In the opening scenes. That's really what sets it up.
Well, I mean, I would argue that it's not motivated by any intention to replace anything, because you can see them mourning, like.
Well, to fill a void, I meant, like. Because there's that scene when she's by herself. They still have the rest of their house is still set up, but she goes into that child's nursery.
Yeah.
And weeps. And that's how you know that all of them.
And John Krasinski has that box of pictures and memories from his son, like that he.
And
keeps.
The daughter still has the spaceship, and the other son is kind of like the mediator to try to keep the peace between everybody. And that, you really realize that all of them are carrying the guilt and responsibility of that child's death. They've internalized it and blame themselves, and because they literally cannot talk about it, that's where they've all spiraled to. That's what really makes me think that I know that the main idea is that it's about parents taking care of their kids, but I really think it's I see it as a metaphor for the loss of a child and what a family goes through when they lose a child, because the monster that you can't talk about is there, and it's the death of that child, and they have to live every day being reminded, because they have to live with that monster as well as live with the loss, and
it's awesome to me thinking more about it, the depth and breadth of the story, given the limited resources that they had. And by limited resources, I mean, like, they don't have a ton of exposition to talk about what's going on and to be able to discuss what's happening. They don't have a lot of different characters. The characters are really the family, that couple in the middle of the woods that ends up dying, and that's it.
And the fires. It's implied that there are other survivors, because every
to
night
me is
he
like,
lights a fire on the silo to see the other.
Yeah.
There's like 4 other fires that light up at the same time that represent other survivors.
And I read after we watched it that there's like a sequel in the works. And now remembering that there were those other fires, I'm like, well, that's gotta be a sequel waiting to happen. They can explore other characters and other people who are also living through this post-apocalyptic kind of existence.
Yeah.
one other aspect that I found really interesting when I was reading it is that originally John Krasinski was not going to caption the dialogue, the sign language between the family members. He originally was just going to like let it be interpreted as it was and only caption the daughter who was deaf. And that actress, again, brilliant, so talented. She was one of the kind of advisors for the sign language aspect of the movie and encouraged them to caption all of it. And so they ended up captioning all of it. But she is the reason when you,
I'm so glad they did that.
Yeah, me too. Because it's so much better of an explanation of what's happening and you don't have to guess and try and figure it out. But one thing that the daughter did was, as she was helping the rest of the cast kind of learn sign language, you can see it that the way that they sign is different based on the character, based on their motivation, based on the whole who they are as a character in the movie. Like the teenage daughter is frustrated with her dad, and so her sign language is more quick and shortcut, and like she cuts off words and cuts off sentences. Emily Blunt's character, when she's talking to her son and she's going through the like, this is why you have to take care of me when I'm old, and she's like long and dramatic and like really strings out her sign language and makes it this like very eloquent and like verbose kind of communication. John Krasinski's character is like short and to the point because he doesn't have time to screw around. He's trying to protect his family and needs to get people where they need to go, and like it's all business. But like those nuances and those differences, even in the way that they're signing to each other, shows the level of communication that this family was able to form given such limited resources, in that they couldn't communicate. So like the limited way that they can communicate, you still see their characters unfolding and developing through the way that they interact with one another.
Yeah, no, and that's so true. And I think of that scene when he's trying to give her like you don't know how many different versions of her hearing aids. She has bone hearing aids, like the ones that
cochlear.
They like
cochlear implants. I made videos about those.
Yeah, they like
genitally deaf. That's what it says.
Yeah, so like she can hear, she just doesn't have the hairs in her ears that allow her to hear. So if you can just translate those vibrations some other way, your ears will be able to hear them, right? And her hearing aids are broken or they're not as effective, and so that's one of the like plot points of the movie is he's constantly redoing her hearing aids to try to get them to work for her. And you don't know how many versions he's come up with, but he gives her another one and she's like, she's signing, it's not going to work. And he tries to just push her hand away and put them in her ears. And she's like, just stop. And like the way she signs that is like a kid, like a teenager.
Like a teenager yelling at their parents. Yeah.
No, that's great.
That's one of those things that's so beautiful. I'm remembering now too, is like that metaphor for the grief. I love that what you said about the monster being like a physical manifestation of that. And that's the best kind of science fiction, the kind of science, because like, again, I'm not a fan of rap music as rap music. Like I'll listen to 80s music just because it's 80s music, just because I don't care what it is, it probably make me kind of happy. But like not all rap music is gonna make me kind of happy. Hamilton did, because it's infused with it's like that's the vehicle for this passionate story. And same thing here. It's like the best kind of science fiction for me, or the only kind of science fiction that I can really get on board with, is when it's when it's telling us, is when the science fiction element of it heightens the story that is being told. So like you're saying, this is a big metaphor for the fact that these people can't talk about. They literally can't talk about the trauma that they all experience and how it's affecting them all. So one of the ways that manifests is like the deaf child thinks that doesn't she think think her father feels it's her fault or something? Thinks that they hate her.
And she doesn't even get to tell him that. The brother tells the dad, like when they're at the waterfall, and he's like,
another beautiful scene where he takes him out to the waterfall to experience.
And you can see the terror that other brother has, the terror that he has about making any noises and being in situations where he's going to have to make noises, because the way he was affected by his younger brother's death is that it is like paralyzingly fearful to do anything or go anywhere or have any experiences because he is so panicked that something's going to happen to somebody else in his family the way that happened to his little brother.
But like him and so then John Krasinski to help him get over this is he's kind of forcing him to learn how to fish, to forage, right? And really you find out once they get there, it's to realize that as long as there's a louder noise that's going to cover for you, it's okay to make noise in this world that you're not allowed to make noise. And so at first they're just next to a river and they can actually talk, like just have a normal conversation. And then he takes him to a waterfall. And this is where the sound editor better get a fucking Oscar for this movie. Like it's just, you have spent up to this point, and this is the other thing too, this movie, there's not one frame wasted. It's only like 87 minutes long. It's a short movie. It's not very long at all. I should not speculate. I have
90 minutes. It's 90 minutes.
It's 90 minutes. So they don't make hour and a half long movies anymore. They're all like 2 hours plus. So I remember the second time through realizing like, man, this is so short. But it's perfect. It's just, there's not a wasted frame. But the sound editor deserves an Oscar because you've spent 40 minutes up to this point with nothing louder than that first scene when the spaceship goes off. And it does this. It's one of the only like jump cuts in the movie where they go from the river to the waterfall. And it's like, it is flooding you with sound in the theater.
Thunderous.
It's like so you're there in the waterfall with the father and the son, and this is where they're in a safe space that they can finally talk and that's when the son says like, do you blame her? And John Krasinski looks hurt. Like he looks physically hurt. He looks emotionally hurt. Mm-hmm. Like, how could you think that? No, I don't blame her. And he, like, again, you can't talk. And the son's response is, you should tell her. How can he tell her? Like, because they can't talk, you know, like, shit.
Yeah, it is. It's really emotional. Like, it really, like, somehow, even though they don't say things, and we're talking on a podcast where we say everything for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
It's so unbelievable how much they communicate with those silences. But yeah, so then there's I gotta say, it has to be under that waterfall that the kid was conceived, because that's another thing.
Like, exactly. Well, I didn't even think of that. That's a great insight.
Oh yeah,
that's gotta be true.
Totally practical business. I mean, I would get taken out for just burping or farting for sure.
Absolutely. Or just my belly, just like, you know, like any of those things. In traditional, so this is the one, I guess, and it's a scary movie so you got to take everything with a grain of salt. The one thing that was just a little hard for me to suspend disbelief on is like this, it all falls apart in this at the same time. Everything falls apart at the same time. Like she steps on that nail and goes into labor at the same time as like the daughter's like, fuck my family, I'm gonna run away, at the same time that the father and son are out like having their moment by the waterfall. So it's like they've spent 500 days almost as close together as possible, and the first time that they're all spread apart and all apart from each other, that's when everything good decides to go down. Like that.
Yeah.
Presumably the first time. We don't know what might have happened. You know, but I agree with you. I think it's a weird, like
it's this
perfect storm of all of this shit going down at the same time, that it all happens that way.
But again, they have to pull it off in 90 minutes. And so, but
the way that I like to think of those kind of things when I can, is that like that's why you're hearing this story, because it's the most, because real life is fucked up sometimes, like crazy coincidence results and things, and it's like, well, we're hearing this story because like this crazy sequence of it's noteworthy, right? In the fictional world.
How many times have you felt like when it rains it pours in your own life? You know, like, and again, like movies always heighten everything, and that's exactly what this is just like, or you're never handed more than you can, you're never handed more than you can handle, or whatever.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because they do kind of handle it. I mean, as best they can. Some of them pretty well.
So that all comes down, and I love the birth scene, like that, the tension that's built.
The tension in that
around from the moment she steps on that nail.
Yeah.
Oh, that alone, that was enough, honestly.
Yeah.
Because she's pulling the laundry basket up the stairs, and you see her pull that nail, and the audience knows what's going to happen.
Beautiful foreshadowing. I mean, just like the foreshadowing, just like.
And then the fact that it stays there. Like, I just kept waiting for someone else to step on it.
Right.
Yeah.
It was such a looming menace.
And luckily it never plays again, but then the trick that she does with the egg timer, because she's in that tiny confined basement with one of those things that we've seen up to this point, there's no stopping them. There's just like
reminds me of the Predator alien, like the alien from Predator. It looks similar, not the same, but similar to the
That's
Predator.
That's fair.
Alien.
I always think of the Cloverfield monster, just because they have those like the really long arms that kind of come off their back.
I refuse to watch Cloverfield.
Oh yeah.
I haven't seen that yet.
You refuse.
He keeps bringing it up like, hey, how about we watch Cloverfield?
I want her to watch
Short Drink.
I really want her to watch it.
Oh, yeah.
I can't do it. No.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But I don't think
I don't think it's a good idea.
So we finished this movie.
Yeah.
And as we're going up to bed, she stops and she's like, and another scary movie that I can't wait to watch again. Like,
oh yeah.
That I would watch again. That I would definitely watch again, just because, like we were saying at the beginning, like you watch something for the first time and you miss a dozen things that you're not paying attention to because there are other things that draw your attention. That's one of those movies that there are so many layers. Even in that 90 minutes, I know there are a dozen things that I didn't see the first time.
I saw a bunch. And
you saw it watching it for the second time with me.
I saw a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Well, that was third.
Well, in that opening scene, we're 40 minutes away from the point. In that opening scene, one of the things I noticed that when they're in the pharmacy and they're foraging, the chip aisle is complete. It's all still stocked. The rest of the store is completely like decimated because chips are noisy. The bags are noisy. The chips themselves are noisy. That's the only thing in that store. That aisle is pristine. It's all fully stocked. And who would think of that? Like John Krasinski, like a brilliant filmmaker, would think of that. But the tension during the climax is just. It's some of the best horror movie tension. It's just so good. It's just, like, how's she going to get out of that basement? Oh my gosh, she got out of the basement. How's she going to have this fucking baby?
How's she in that bathtub and the monster's coming up the stairs?
And then the son's got to overcome all of his fear and go off on his own to do something, like to literally save his mom. You need to know how to do this so that you can take care of me. That's what the mom told him before he left on that trip. And then he has to go off on his own to take care of his mom, like to go set off that firework, and like, so good. And that
so many layers.
They're building up. The daughter's coming back. John Krasinski's trying to find his wife. The son's going to light the fireworks. Emily Blunt's getting ready to have the baby. The alien's coming up the fucking stairs. She's crowning. She's gonna have to scream. It's gonna happen. It's coming. And that fireworks goes off, and like you get flooded with sound and color from the fireworks.
Yeah.
And she screams like right into the camera. She screams, and just like, and your tension is relieved just like hers is, because that sound is there. Again, that
and then my immediate thought is a newborn fucking baby, a newborn baby.
What's that?
How are they going to keep a newborn baby quiet?
Right, and that's where you realize that what they were doing in that room in the basement of the barn, where they were putting all the paper up on the walls and making that crate. That's all soundproofing. You realize that goes
but that's
to
brilliant
shit.
foreshadowing. It's brilliant. It's brilliant, like building up the character and the story. And it's almost like the lights and the sounds that you hear and that you don't hear are also characters in the story. It's not just
and
they're not just extra.
It's kind of a payoff for the fans because once you realize what they were doing, you're like, that's never gonna fucking work. That's not gonna work, and it doesn't. It falls apart as soon as they need it. It falls apart. Because of the water, and you realize like how precarious how delusional they were to think that it would work, and
I forgot about the water.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Man. And I think that, so I think the sound editor deserves all the awards and Emily Blunt deserves all the supporting actress awards because the way she interacts with the children in that movie, the way that scene where she's having the baby, and then the last shot with no sound, how she is able with her eyes and her stature to go from fear to hope. Like she switches from all of her posturing is everything I've worked for to protect my children is all going to unravel in front of my eyes to I can fucking do this. And you're just, and she racks that fucking shotgun.
Yeah.
And you're just like you wanted her to, you're like, please, I want that shot. And she fucking delivers.
Yep.
Yeah, she comes Sarah Connor in that moment.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. And in a split
Quiet
second,
Place too, she's gonna be doing pull-ups.
Yeah,
tank top.
And a strap shirt, pull-ups and a strap shirt. Yeah. Oh man, yeah, no, like that. That's my takeaway of those two things. Like I feel like those two people, the sound editor and Emily Blunt, deserve all the awards because I'm glad she fought for him to put her in that movie because they had great chemistry, obviously, because I love watching them together because they are so in love with each other. So they had that great chemistry, beautiful. But then, man, does she just sells it. It's so good. So good.
Yeah. Quick shout out to because I was sort of like when a little bit after Hamilton too, like the Hamilton thing when I'm like, well, fucking one dude came up with this. I was furious in a way. When I thought he wrote and directed this, John Krasinski, I was like losing my mind. And it made me feel just a little bit better that there were two, that the writers were this guy named Brian Woods and Scott Beck. And then John Krasinski got involved. But just quick shout out to whoever those guys are. Yeah. But whatever, the creative team behind this is, they did something that had not been done before and was unbelievable.
And another kudos to the whole production team because at any point, John Krasinski could have just said, okay, you kids are kids. You stand where I say, you do what I say, you say what I say. That's it. Like, that's all you are. But he engaged his daughter, like Regan's character. She, as the deaf child, like helped advise and like guide that aspect of the movie. And I read something that said like the very ending where John Krasinski's about to get killed by the monster, he's shot in the stomach, he's standing there, he looks at his daughter in the pickup truck. They both know what's about to happen. Dad is going to sacrifice himself to keep his kids alive. And in the original script, he looks at his daughter and says, I love you, and signs that. And originally that's all he was going to say. And it was her suggestion to say, you need to say, I have always loved you. Because
she's been blaming herself that whole time.
She has been blaming herself that whole time. Yeah. So when you say, I love you, that's what a father says to his daughter. But when he looks at her and says, I have always loved you, that melts away any doubt that she had or any blame that she might have put on herself or thinking that he blamed her for her brother's death.
And it ties it back to the conversation that the son had with him, where the son said, you should tell her. And that's what he uses his last moments.
That's the first opportunity he had to tell her, and he did.
Yep.
Yeah.
Was to tell her that. And it's not tell your mother I love her, or it's I have always loved you, because he needs to clear that up in those last moments. And the slow-mo and because you can see the creature is like behind him and coming in that, and like it's out of focus, and just like that. So, and the brother hits the e-brake on the truck at the same moment, and just like, fuck that movie is good.
Yeah.